Well, it is March Madness, but we are crazy about football here at the View from the West podcast. Mitch, it's the off season, but there is plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it's the off season, but there's always action, always things to talk about. So certainly this week, we've got some big changes in the sport that we wanted to discuss, and maybe just take some time to recap some things that have happened since our last shows within the last 3 months.
Well, let's get into it. Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a View from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome back to View from the West podcast, the podcast covering Illinois high school football on the western side of the state of Illinois. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, and we're joined once again, as always, by Morrison's favorite Mustang, Mitch Stormer. Mitch, it's good to see you. It's good to just say that intro again.
Right? Yeah, it's a weird feeling of it feels like we just did a show not too long ago, but it also feels like it was forever ago. But yeah, great to be back. As we said in the open, certainly wanted to always have some off-season shows in our lineup, but certainly have a lot of things to talk about. And yeah, thought it was great timing on some of this because we were planning on recording anyway. So might as well get the fans and give them some content here.
Yeah, we had planned, like you said, to get an episode back up and rolling here, and then the IHSA gives us plenty to discuss. So a lot of changes heading into the 2025 football season. So here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about those changes. Well, maybe talk a lot about the changes coming in 2025. Talk about some coaching changes from around the area, some conference affiliation changes coming down the road, some news that broke, into the shortly into the offseason that we haven't really had a chance to jump in and discuss. But Mitch, have you filled out a bracket? Is your tournament bracket ready to go for the March Madness?
No.
The clock is ticking.
It won't get filled out either. This is probably the least amount of college basketball I've watched this year.
Okay.
Outside of the occasional Xavier game, I went to one. Have not watched enough.
That did not stop me from filling out a bracket. And
maybe that's the strategy.
Yeah,
maybe it's good.
True. Yeah.
I know that some teams are good. I know which teams are good. But as always, it's never going to work out the way that anyone thinks. So hoping for some fun games. It looks like the first 4 games have all been exciting. So usually that's hopefully a good indicator for the rest of the tournament. So yeah, looking forward to watching it regardless.
There you go. Well, as people are listening to this, hopefully they're listening in one ear and they're watching some basketball on another screen, a little multi-sport experience there. But like we said, plenty to talk about in the world of high school football in the state of Illinois. Before we get into it, Mitch, tell them who they need to know. Tell them who we need to thank.
Oh, they already know. Tonight's episode is brought to you by our friends at Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They provide all the same sporting goods services as the big nationwide companies, but with a faster turnaround, and their uniform pricing is a fraction of the cost you are probably used to. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. Check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com, or shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com for more information.
Well, Breedloves has certainly been busy helping us out. They were shipping out Team of the Year t-shirts to Amboy and to Lena Winslow. They also were shipping out personalized custom View from the West Player of the Year trophies to all of our conference winners and our division winners within each conference. So very exciting there. If you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to the awards episode for 2024 for the season, that was one of our last episodes of the football season. Go back and check that out in the podcast archives. We also have an exciting episode coming up next week. I sit down and talk to high school coach, Hall of Famer from the state of Illinois, Coach Tom Yupst, the former coach of the Marquette Crusaders, just stepped down and retired after 15 years. But Mitch, he was also a head coach at your alma mater in Morrison. Before that, he was at New Berlin, a Hall of Fame coaching career. It's a great interview. I sit down and we talk about, a little bit of everything over the course of his career, the fun stories from the sidelines. He coached several years with his twin brother. So that's some really fun, stories we get into there, because they didn't always see eye to eye coaching, but
Sure.
it was a lot of fun. And one thing I didn't realize, I guess I kind of knew, he coached at Ottawa High School, took the job there for about 3 years in the early 90s, and then stepped away to become the high school principal, and then never coached football again until he jumped into that Marquette job in 2009. So, I mean, I had thought he had stayed connected and was still helping out, with Ottawa High School all that time that he was principal, but he was not. He was very disconnected. And I just find that remarkable that he was, jumped in and kind of resurrected his coaching career and had a 15-year run that was remarkable at Marquette, really turned them around. And so I will say to the viewers, if you indulge me a little bit, it is kind of a passion project for me. Obviously, I'm a Marquette Crusader, Marquette alum, and I really love what Coach Yups did for that program. So, take a little time. Let me enjoy that interview, but it is a really good interview with a lot of good insight and a lot of good stories there. So
yeah, always good to talk to a legendary coach like that. And certainly with your background with Marquette and my background at Morrison, looking forward to having the listeners listen to that episode and hear some great stories from a great coach.
Yep. So that should be coming out sometime next week. And, down the road, we'll have to talk about, maybe we won't go completely radio silent here for the next few months again. Maybe we'll kind of keep up some sporadic episodes, find some coaches to talk to, and, find some stuff to keep the fans entertained. I would say that the masses were clamoring, desperate for us to come back, but I got one text. So I'll say that was the masses clamoring for us to come back.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right, should we get into the big news? Kind of the reason we're here. The IHSA Board of Directors held their March meeting last Saturday. They approved 3 significant changes to the classification policy. So that includes fixed classifications for classes in non-football. So it doesn't really involve, us here being a football podcast, but I thought it was important to bring up. Also, the bigger changes coming that affect football in a direct way, the multiplier waiver process is changing, and the success formula, the success factor will be adjusted in how that's adapted moving forward. So, Mitch, do we want to kind of get in and break down each part of the changes here?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Well, we'll start at number 1. Like I said, the fixed classes. So they're going to return to fixed class system, which the IHSA had used traditionally for years and years up until 2007. From 2007 to 2024, the IHSA used a percentage-based formula to determine the classes. So I think to try to equal out, amongst populations and amongst the number of active schools that were involved in the IHSA. I'm not sure this makes a significant difference, but I do think it maybe bring a little bit of clarity to the system on what level you're playing at year over year, especially when you consider the IHSA is going to, year over year reevaluate overall enrollment for schools. So I think it should help a little bit. There's kind of going to cut out some of the guesswork of who's in what classification. And it's not going to be 2 years and then wait and find out again in 2 years. I think the year over year will help a little bit in that case.
Yeah. And like you said, this is kind of more of a non-football thing because a lot of the comments when these came out was in regards to basketball and the changes that are going to be in play there. Certainly not our area of expertise.
Yep.
But it makes sense. They were playing in 3 classes for basketball for as you said for so long since 2007.
Well, they went from 2 to 4, 2 classes to 4 classes, and then some other sports do 3 classes. So anyway, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. I think that this makes sense. I don't think we'll be talking about this particular change a lot on this show, but
no,
certainly the schools that we cover and certainly all the different sports that the IHSA offers, you'll see this impacted more.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we will be talking a lot about, and what we have been talking a lot about.
Yeah,
Is that the understatement of the new year here in our podcast?
I think so. Yeah, if anyone who follows the show or listens to the show, certainly probably before the state championship, and then certainly much after the state championship, this was debated and talked about on this show. We were pretty heavily critical about this, towards the IHSA, towards the system, and that sentiment seemed to carry over across a lot of people. Certainly people that we talked to at the state championship that day, on that Friday, and just seeing the articles and the conversations following that.
Yep.
Yeah, this has been a big topic recently, and I give kudos to the IHSA for making a quick remedy on this, moving forward.
Yeah, to backtrack, I'm sure most listeners, 99% of our listeners already know, but it ended up being 7 out of 8 state champions were in football this year were non-boundary private schools. And at least I can speak from, being there on that Friday. Those Friday games were all blowouts. Not even
41 points.
Yeah.
Average.
Yeah. Not even, hardly even competitive. So there was the glaring problem that started right away on Friday. It carried into Saturday when you saw, non-boundary schools, private schools continue to win. So there was a discussion, and I think a very lively discussion on how this happened, what needs to change, and, how do you go about changing it? And I give the IHSA credit, like you said, they swooped in here and they made some changes, and I think they're changes that certainly move us in the right direction. I don't know that they're perfect, but we'll get into it here, and we'll kind of talk about what it is and how I think helps things a little bit in the immediate future. And no system will ever be perfect, but I think we're getting a lot closer to having a system that is a little more fair and equitable across the board. So here we go. The multiplier waiver process. Mitch, let's read through. I'll let you take this one, read through it, kind of give us the breakdown of what's changing, what we had and what's changing.
Okay, so we got to circle all the way back to when I was in high school in 2005. The IHSA member schools voted to implement a 1.65 multiplier on the classification enrollment of its non-boundaried schools. That means that you would take the normal enrollment of that school for that year and have to multiply it by the 1.65. And that was their mathematical way of equaling the playing field. So then there was an automatic waiver of that multiplier, and that was developed based on a school's lack of success in a state series. But now, beginning next season, that automatic waiver process is gone. It's eliminated. And it's being replaced by a sort of an annual waiver application process. A baseline criteria has been established, if a team is eligible or not to apply for this waiver. And that means that a program that is non-boundaried is not eligible to apply for a waiver if they win at least one IHSA playoff football game over the course of the previous 3 seasons.
Yep.
Previously, the waiver was automatic if teams had not won a combined 3 playoff games over 2 seasons, and it would work within that kind of 2-year cycle. And that's where you would see, especially this past year, teams that met, and call it a loophole if you want. Again, it's within the rules, and we've never tried to blame the schools on this. We've always talked about it being a problem with the system, but there were loopholes, and this was one of them that you would know ahead of time what your outlook was going to be the following year, and you could accommodate for that in however way they accommodate for that. You would know what classification you would be playing in based if you had that waiver or not. And so that factor is now gone.
Yep. So looking at now, the IHSA staff, a school must apply annually to be approved for the waiver if they qualify, if they're eligible, if they have not had the one playoff win. IHSA staff will review each waiver request with the school name being removed, and the vote will be an approve or deny, a simple majority vote. So I think that's important to note, that the IHSA is not going to receive a stack of, named schools and just be able to say, show bias potentially. To try to avoid that.
Right.
The name, it's anonymous, so that you won't know what school you're voting on, which I think is important to note there. So the board will review the staff notes, and they have the discretion to change things too. So the IHSA staff will look at them and make a vote. The board can step in if they feel like something has not been, processed the right way.
If multiplied off of 2024 enrollments, if this would have been in effect last year, Althoff would have been a 3A team. Chicago Christian would have been a 3A. Montini would have been a 5A, and DePaul would have been a 7A.
Yeah,
so
the DePaul one is
won.
Yeah,
all those teams won, and that's for DePaul, that's a growing school.
Yep.
It's had a lot of growth, but they've also won 3 straight basketball titles. Which, by the way, they're the only program this year that won a basketball and a football championship.
Yeah.
But again, had that policy been in place for the 2044 season, only DePaul Prep would have been eligible for a multiplier waiver.
Looking at other sports, volleyball, basketball, soccer, baseball, softball, in order to get the waiver, or in order to be eligible for the waiver, if you win an IHSA sectional semifinal, that means you're not eligible to get the waiver. So that's an adjustment as well from the previous system, or the way the rules were set up. I do think when looking at it, it does seem like it's a little tougher to get the waiver in football, but I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. Does that sound right to you? I mean,
it's definitely tougher, and I think that's for the better.
I meant compared to other sports. You think it's tougher to get the waiver for football than it is to get the waiver for, the other sports I just named: volleyball, basketball, soccer. You win one football game in 3 years, or you win an IHSA sectional semifinal.
It's probably harder in the other sports, don't you think?
I don't know. I just had a coach bring it up to me, and I, at initial thought, I had kind of agreed with them, that I think that waiver in football, I mean, if you win one playoff game in any 3 year span, you're not getting the waiver. So whereas on the other,
it's definitely tough.
And you're right. It is tougher.
Getting to a sectional semifinal is also tough.
Yeah.
I guess I would lean that it's harder to get one in football, I suppose, especially in a 3 year span. To not win a playoff game in 3 years, there could be a variety of factors that play into that. But I think that that's a fair amount of time to say, okay, your multiplier can be excused for 1 year. And I think that's important too. It's a yearly thing.
Yep.
So once you get it, you don't get it for 2 years like you used to. You have to do it again the following year if you don't win a playoff game that next year too. So no, and again, we saw how I don't want to make it keep seeming like teams like intentionally did this, but it was a loophole that could have been exposed, and that's exactly what we saw this past year. We've seen it in 3A, 4A, 5A with some non-boundary schools that have either consistently been in those classes. And so, I think this will reset the norm a little bit, and I think that's good. Again, I don't want to go back to Althoff because there's no need to talk about it, but that sort of thing just shouldn't happen, not in 1A football. So I think that this will eliminate that. There'll still be some, teams that get through the cracks or stars aligning, but you can't combat that completely. But making this an annual thing, I think is a big deal, and it will bring balance, I think.
That's what I was just going to get to. I think the big step was going to an annual enrollment review. Yeah. So you get, kind of the most up-to-date information. Because I felt like in the previous system where it was 2-year cycles, it was like, especially when we get into the success factor in a minute here, it was like you were kind of using information that was not outdated, but it was getting older, right? And it's like you're using 2 years ago for 2 years moving forward. And it just felt like it was, it just wasn't the most, up-to-date way to keep track of where schools were at. So I think this is a great step to kind of, like I said, equal the playing field a little bit. Let's talk about the success factor and what that's changing to, and then we'll kind of give our overall thoughts here. So looking at the success factor, teams that have achieved trophies twice in the past 3 seasons will be subjected to the success formula, regardless of the sequence of when these trophies were won. So I'll explain kind of what that means and why that's kind of thrown in there. But when the success formula is applied, it will be for a 2-year period after its implementation. So it will mean that a school who played and won at 5A will bump up into 6A, or, however, whatever class they're in, they go up one classification. So I think what's worth noting here, where it says, regardless of the sequence of when the trophies were won, this is similar to the old rule, the old success factor, but that was based around the 2-year enrollment cycle. So Steve Susie did a great job from Friday Night Drive of kind of breaking it down. And his example was, if a team won trophies in 22 and 23, they would not be subjected to the success formula. But had they won in 23 and 24, the middle of that 2-year enrollment period, they would have been subject to it. So the way things played out with Nazareth and Mount Carmel were able to win 3 consecutive state championships without facing the success factor because of when their titles fell in those 2-year periods. It's such a goofy kind of loophole. And again, like, it's no fault of the school. They went out and won the way the rules were laid out according to the IHSA. But it just seems kind of like a weird kind of goofy rule that there was no need to have it on a 2-year cycle when we could just, I would think put in the legwork to get enrollments at the beginning of every school year or over the summer at a certain deadline. And then, kind of year over year where you're going to sit.
Right.
So I think this change is, subtle, but I think it's another good change.
It'll move Mount Carmel to 8A. It'll move Nazareth to 6A. It'll move Joliet Catholic to 6A. Loyola can't go anywhere because they're already 8A.
Yep.
So again, I feel like this is much needed. I think it's a great thing for the sport and for the state. And again, we'll get back to balance here and teams playing at the appropriate classification that they should be playing in.
Yeah. We saw a glaring problem, from our aspect in football, we saw a glaring problem. And I think the IHSA quickly addressed the issue. Now, is it perfect? We've talked about it. I don't think there's any perfect system. This is a big step, though, in the right direction.
Yeah,
I think this goes a long way to creating parity. And I think what I really want to emphasize the fact that, like, the schools that are winning state titles, they still got to earn it. They still got to go on the field and win football games and, to earn those trophies. I think it's important to note, right? There's still high school athletes going out there and competing and winning. But I think that along the way, we just saw some instances, and we don't need to go back and rehash which ones, but we saw instances where just maybe it wasn't a fully level playing field. So they were going out and they were earning the win, and they, had all the talent to do it. But there were some factors that helped them along the way compared to maybe some public schools in their classifications. And that goes across the board on that Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, there's probably more examples of non-boundary schools having success in that old system than there were non-boundary schools being hurt by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where in my head, I still think, get rid of the waiver. Like, just don't make it a thing. I'm sure there are ramifications of that I'm not thinking of. If you're a non-boundary school, having the ability to pull from a 30-mile radius if you have a down year or down 2 years or down 3 years, then sorry, that's just how it is.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I don't think there's a ton of examples of maybe St. Teresa, who are not who they used to be. Because I understand there's challenges at non-boundary schools. I totally understand that. But at the same time, you have that radius to pull from. And so I do think that there would be some issues with eliminating the waiver altogether. But this is a much needed step forward. I think, again, I think it'll clean up a lot of the mess that Friday certainly caused.
Yeah.
And I joked about it in our text between you, me, and Kyle of NUIC Football. Like, I feel like we did our part in terms of holding the IHSA's feet to the fire on this, but we weren't alone in that. It was obvious. It was completely obvious from View from the West podcast to the Chicago Sun-Times. There were articles about how bad this is, how bad of a look that was for the state.
And we talked to Steve Succes that night in the press box at Illinois State, and we saw his article and the tweet he put out along with his article that indicated, he also felt like the system was broken. And he's someone that has seen as much football as anybody, that we're going to talk to, and is, knows the system better than anybody. So I think that, that his opinion carries some weight too. So I think he saw it. We saw it. A lot of people saw it.
And it was Ty talked to Craig Anderson, right? Shortly after the state championship. So this kind of came at the IHSA from a ton of different angles. And so again, kudos to them for recognizing that there was something wrong. It was obvious that something was wrong and that they have moved to fix it. And we'll wait and see how this plays out. We don't know that it's going to work or it's not going to work. It would appear on paper that this is better than it was, but we'll wait to see. And if it doesn't, or if it does or it doesn't, then they'll make adjustments then too.
Yeah. Speaking of Ty Taylor from WRMJ, we were talking about it before we hit record tonight. They did a really cool episode of Sportsline live in Champaign during the state championship basketball games. So it was the third place games earlier in the morning that morning. And Jim and Ty were live, and they had, I'm blanking on the name, but it was an IHSA official involved with the basketball tournament. And then they also had Matt Troha from the IHSA as well. And really good conversation, a lot about this. And these decisions had not been made yet, but there was a lot of alluding to the meetings that were happening that weekend in Champaign. And, I think of all the things we think that, this is done right. I think a lot of people around the state feel like this is a step in the right direction. I get it. There's some people that may not love this. Honestly, I would love to hear from people who have criticism of this, plan moving forward. And I'd love to hear their possible solutions. I talked to a handful of coaches today through text. Mitch, I know you talked to some coaches today through text. All of them were, from my opinion and from what I've heard from you, were in support of this, that they felt like it was a good move. And I think it's important to note, we talked to non-boundary coaches and public school coaches.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep. So, and again, I didn't look a ton into the heat that came from this, but it seemed like it was coming from more of the basketball crowd. So, we talked to a couple of non-boundary coaches, and they like the idea. They think it's fine. They think it's fair. So if they think it, then I'm on board.
Yeah. I will say that I think maybe some of the critique of this system comes from, again, like we've talked about, the non-boundary schools that come from particularly large population density, larger parts of the state where there's a lot of student athletes to draw from. That can be considered maybe more of the problem than the non-boundary private schools that are in smaller, more rural, more remote locations. So I think that, yes, maybe there is something to be said about, there are some schools maybe that are being not punished. I don't think that's the right word, because they're still non-boundary private schools, but maybe they're hurt more, they're affected more potentially than some schools who are able to draw from, larger areas and who are more actively seeking out, recruiting high school athletes, and not just a school that's based around, families coming in and year out, generation after generation. So I think there are some differences there. I had heard some ideas being tossed around. I think they're being discussed about the idea of the multiplier being based on population density. So if you're in an area that's more populated, your multiplier is a little higher than areas that are not as populated. That's an interesting thought. I've always kind of wanted to look into that, or I've thought that the IHSA should look into that. We've talked about it in years past about that's a way to potentially draw up, quote unquote, a football enrollment. If you take, the teams you play during the regular season, average their enrollments, that could kind of help be a quote unquote football enrollment.
And the team that jumps out immediately is Chicago Hope, where they could be negatively impacted by that.
That's a great point. Yep, that's a great, or a Chicago Christian, the team we just saw win a state title, but that's also a school that I think, yes, you're right, they would be negatively affected on that end as well. Yes.
Yeah.
So again, I think that's a great way to kind of sum up this conversation, that there probably is no perfect system.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere, there are plenty of people screaming at their podcast devices right now saying the perfect system is public and private or in separate classes.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Nope.
I understand. Maybe I understand why people do. I don't know. I don't know that I could even say I understand it, because I don't want to go that route. I think there's ways to level the playing field without completely diluting, the tournament the way it's set up. I wanted to bring it up, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But
no,
I know there's people who feel that way. So
yeah, no, how much I would love to see a Mount Carmel versus a Loyola 8A state championship, right? I would love to see East St. Louis play Joliet Catholic again in a correct classification. So, I think we'll get some more big time matchups. They still could be two private schools in state championships. But at least they're not, at least Monticello isn't getting blown out.
Yeah.
At least, whoever isn't getting blown out in a state championship. So, And I just thought of this too. I said Chicago Hope would be a negative. They just won the 1A state championship in basketball. So they would, at least for basketball, they'd be factored in. But for football, I think it might affect them a little bit.
Yeah. I think the bigger question is, Mitch, in that potential Loyola and Mount Carmel 8A state championship matchup, who wins your battle of the uniforms? Who's the better uni?
Oh, that's Mount Carmel, easy.
Okay, I'm glad we agree on that, because we don't always. So yeah. I would agree.
I like Loyola, but I think I've always, whenever we've done state championship previews, Mount Carmel is always like my number one or up there. So it's hard to beat them.
Yep. All right. Well, I will say, we'll leave it at that. I think it's positive steps in the right direction to leveling the playing field. I'm excited. It makes me happy to know that there are, people in the IHSA offices who are listening and who saw the problems. And I know that there were coaches who have that influential voice to the IHSA who are, making the reasonable, mature, responsive, we're giving you feedback to the IHSA, not just shouting on X, not just shouting, anytime they get on social media, but actually making coordinated efforts to respond and to make it a productive process. And I think we got there. We got there in this off season.
And they did in 3 months. So again, kudos to them.
Yep. All right. Well, we talked about changes to the rules or changes to the multiplier. Let's talk about changes on the sidelines, Mitch. We're talking coaching changes from around the area. We'll start in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference, Mercer County. We talked about Tanner Matlick being out at Mercer County. Fred Lucas takes over as head coach. He spent the last 8 seasons as an assistant coach with the program. And really, when you start looking around at this Mercer County program, obviously last year was, I'm sure, frustrating for a lot of people involved.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be excited about when you look at this Golden Eagle program and Fred Lucas stepping in as head coach, taking over.
Yeah, Mason Gray coming back, John Baldwin coming back. They get Tannen Whitehall back, who missed all last year. So, yeah, Coach Lucas is really inheriting a good roster, subjugated to a lot of drama last year on those sidelines. And I felt terrible for everyone involved in that. But, Fred Lucas having been there, he's been a head coach before. He was at Roseville, Yorkwood, Westwood, and United. So they bring in some experience, and maybe that's what you need to kind of reset a little bit. So Mercer County can take a swing at that Three Rivers championship this year.
Yeah, I think it's a good hire in the fact that you're obviously trying to hit the reset button here. But in doing that, you're not completely like wiping out, you're not making a whole
continuity there.
Yeah, there's some continuity there. I think that's good. He has the head coaching experience, had some success when he was at United in his most recent, head coaching job. So I'm excited to see what he can do there and kind of maybe just turn things around a little bit, or just, get a little more positive news from the Mercer County Golden Eagles in their second year in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. All right, let's keep moving down the way. Spring Valley Hall, after just 1 year, Logan Larson leaves Hall. He's returning to his alma mater, Pleasant Plains, to be their next head coach. So the Red Devils 2-7 last fall. They were 1-4 in Mississippi, in Three Rivers, Mississippi play. So, this is kind of it's tough to see this one, because I think there was some excitement around Coach Larson, a young coach, gets this job and is really excited to jump in and, get this Hall program kind of up there in the top of that division of the Three Rivers. But he gets a good opportunity to go back to his alma mater, so you can't fault him for that. But on the Hall end of things, you're not going to have 3 head coaches in 3 years. It's just hard with the consistency.
Yeah, well, I like the note here, as our friend of the show, Kevin Hieronymus from the Bureau County Republican and Friday Night Drive. Larson was the first Hall head coach hired with no ties to the school previously in 45 years.
Yeah, well, and that's a Hall program with a lot of rich tradition, right? So they knew, they were very familiar with really good football in that program, and so you could keep hiring from within. And they had a winning product for a lot of those years. So that's what'll be interesting here, is to see where they go next. Is it another outside hire? Do they go back to somebody that's familiar with the program? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see kind of where they pivot to, and we'll awaiting official word to see when they hire somebody. So, all right, looking around the rest of the Three Rivers Athletic Conference, one more job. Mendota, the Trojans hired Jim Eustace. He takes over for Keegan Hill. Hill stepped down after 7 seasons in Mendota. His best was in 2021. Qualified for the playoffs, finished at 5-5. Their last winning season in Mendota was 2014. They were 6-4. So they've struggled. It's been a while since they've been really, a good football team. They've struggled. Eustace brings a lot of coaching experience. So, Mitch, give us the rundown on Eustace, what he brings here.
Yeah, so Eustace is coming in, both having coached at Marquette, but then more recently St. Bede. 46-47 in 10 years at St. Bede. Led the Bruins to 4 playoff berths in 2016, and then 21, 22, and 23. Those were great teams that we covered on this show.
Yep.
And 2 second-round playoff appearances in 16 and in 21. So, yeah, Mendota being a 4A school, that they've been down, but bringing in some experience here with Coach Eustace, maybe the spark that they need. And again, maybe he can bring in his experience and build up that youth of Mendota football and start to kind of build up from within. I think it's a great hire. Keegan Hill did a great job there. Like you said, seven seasons. And yeah, looking forward to covering Coach Eustace here as the season rolls on in the fall.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Keegan Hill. I felt like he brought a lot of passion to that job. He was really proud of kind of what they were trying to build there. And, it's unfortunate that the wins didn't follow. I mean, they qualified for the playoffs that 1 year. They had that exciting season in 2021, but overall it was hard. It was a struggle for him. But, shout out to Coach Hill, because I really felt like he put a lot of effort into it. And, really gave it his all to make that work. This Mendota job, obviously, like we talked about it, they haven't had recent success. You back to the early 2000s, like 02 to 2012, they did have a run in there where they were winning some football games and they were making some playoff, appearances. So I think for Coach Eustace, he's, been at St. Bede and he's been at Marquette, some smaller private schools where, you don't always have the numbers. You're trying to, get by with the talent you have, but you may not have the depth that you want. So for him as a coach, I think, this might be a luxury to have some more athletes that he's not accustomed to having that much depth. See how that helps him as a coach. And just in general, like, it's a nice facility. I think they get a lot of community support. Like, can you get things turned around with a little bit of help there? I think what Jim Eustace really did here was, I think he was missing out on coverage from View from the West, because we, used to cover him at St. Bede and then they left the Three Rivers.
Maybe. Yeah, you never know. That could be
we weren't talking about him as
could be the spark Mendota's looking for here.
We weren't talking about him as much when they left the Three Rivers, and Jim Eustace said, "Hey, I need to get to a job where you from the West is talking about me again." Yeah. So here you are. Welcome back into the fold.
Had to have been the reason.
Yeah, and Coach Eustace, he's a Marquette grad like myself. So
there you go. Get him on the pod.
So, all right, let's go through some LLC coaching changes. The one that just came out very recently, Matt Pistol announced that he's stepping down from Bureau Valley after 6 seasons leading the Storm. He's a Bureau Valley grad. That team has shown signs of improvement the whole time he was there. But I think that ultimately he has a young son at home. I think, Kevin Hieronymus, again, from Bureau County Republican, had a great write-up, talking to him about he just, he's been pouring everything he has into this job. And now that he's got a young son at home, he just felt like it was, time to be at home for a little while. And he didn't say, never say never, that he wouldn't coach again, but that for right now, it was the right time to step away. So, I'm happy for him in that aspect, but we will miss covering him, and his passion for Bureau Valley on this podcast.
Yeah, I think one of his comments that he was quoted on in one of those stories was he came home one day and his son greeted him at the door, wanted to be picked up, and his hands were full of football stuff. And he knew at that moment that he needed to step down. So yeah, you can't blame a guy for that. But as you said, he was doing a great job. They had the pound the stone mentality there, and they were showing signs of improvement. They had some great play the past 2 years, especially, and moving into the LLC was a big change there as well. So again, can't fault him for anything. I'm sure the community is very appreciative of everything he did. And we'll, like you said, it's within the last 48 hours that came out or so. So certainly no decision has been made, but big opening there. I think that Bureau Valley job is an intriguing spot, I think.
Yep. So yeah, good luck to Coach Pistol. And, maybe we'll run into him again someday. If he finds that time and wants to get back on the sidelines, we would be happy to cover him again. So we'll keep everybody updated on where Bureau Valley turns for their next head coach. But another opening in the LLC Knoxville, Ryan Hebard steps down after 13 seasons leading the Blue Bullets. In steps Marty Turner. So first of all, shout out to Marty Turner, friend of the podcast.
Yep.
He sent us the email when Coach Hebard was stepping down, which is great because a lot of times, Mitch, that with kind of I hate to say it, but like the lack of newspaper coverage out there, and it just can be really hard to keep up on coaching changes. And so I thank Marty Turner for reaching out to us and letting us know that Ryan Hebard was stepping down and giving him his accolades, and then letting us know a few weeks later that he had been approved as the new head coach. So, like I said, Marty Turner steps in. He's been an assistant in the area since 2004, both with Knoxville and with Galesburg from 2012 to 2020. He takes over a Blue Bullets program that's had a lot of success, under Coach Hebard. In the 13 seasons he was there, Coach Hebard was 83-45, an undefeated regular season in 2019, trips to the quarterfinals in 19 and 22. A fun program to cover, and I'm guessing that Coach Turner is going to keep things kind of business as usual. But, I'm guessing we'll see some fun wrinkles along the way, and we'll see if they can turn around this Knoxville program that had a down year, which they're not accustomed to out there.
Yeah, a really fun program to cover during the course of this show under Hebard's leadership there. So big fans of the Blue Bullets, and Coach Turner's going to do a great job there. Looking forward to seeing them on the field too.
Mitch, I forgot. I have not shared this info with you. Here's some breaking news on the podcast.
Okay.
Marty Turner emailed the other day, followed up in an email and said that to keep the Uniview watch alert because there may be a new helmet coming to Knoxville.
Oh, I like that helmet though.
Oh, but he's excited, and I think he's got ideas, and I'm in. I'm ready. I'm ready to see something.
They could definitely do some great things there. It was just a traditional helmet, and I liked it. So yeah, we'll see what Coach Turner has to come up with. I'm always down for a new helmet.
All right, well, Coach, keep us posted. We are eagerly awaiting any updates on that. So, all right, we'll head to the Northwest Upstate Illini. A couple coaching changes there in Galena. After 21 seasons, head coach Ed Freed has resigned. He compiled a record of 124-89, guiding the Pirates to 12 playoff appearances. He was on the staff for the team that won a state championship in 2003 and then won the state championship in 2007. Thanks to Kyle Kampmeyer from NUICFootball.com, his 124 wins move him into 9th all-time in NUIC history. What a career for Ed Freed. Yeah. I mean, continued the legacy of a great program for another 21 years.
Yeah, just and what a year to go out on too. They had that great first round playoff win against Stark County, and just a really just upstart year for Galena. So yeah, 2 state championships on his belt in 21 years. What more can you ask for? And 124 wins, just a crazy number.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Coach Ed Freed. And if he's retiring, good luck in retirement. Well deserved. But yeah, big changes coming here in Galena.
Little did I realize that when I went to that Marquette at Galena second round playoff game, that I'd be seeing Ed Freed's last win, as a Galena Pirate. And I also, on the flip side, saw Coach Tom Yupp's last game that he coached for Marquette. So kind of a crazy the way things work sometimes. So stepping in Galena will be Kyle Knight. Knight was an assistant on Freed's staff. So you see, that consistency of a great program. Ed Freed had been an assistant and then moved into that head coaching role, did it for 21 years. Kyle Knight had been an assistant. Now he steps in as a head coach. That's kind of what good programs do. Mitch, am I right?
Yeah. No, I think that's what you want. Kind of what we were talking about with Mercer County. You get some continuity there. A longtime assistant. I guess I'm not quite sure how long Coach Knight's been on that staff, but you get continuity, so it's not going to be a huge change. Shouldn't be a huge change anyway. Same thing with Knoxville. So yeah, hopefully Coach Knight can step right in there and they can continue to build on that success that they had this past year.
Yep. All right, couple more coaching changes. We move into or still stay in the Northwest Upstate Illini. Dupec, Kyle DeMuss takes over for head coach Tyler Hoffman. DeMuss is a 2007 grad of Durand, a longtime assistant under Coach Hoffman. Before we talk about DeMuss and what he's inheriting here, let's talk about Coach Hoffman. What a run he had for the Dupec Rivermen, really establishing them as a threat up in the northwest part of the state.
Yeah. Dupec, for as long as we've been covering the show, has just been such a fun team to cover. We're big fans of the Rivermen and their program, everything that they do. So Coach Hoffman, 51-30 in his tenure there, 5 playoff appearances, 2 quarterfinal appearances, back-to-back appearances in 23 and 24. So again, you had the whole Hoffman group there over these last handful of years. And again, great community, a lot of support there. Just always seem to put a good product on the field. We'll be talking more about the Dupec program here in a couple minutes, but yeah, excited to see where this program goes to now in a new direction.
I was going to say, Coach Kyle DeMuss has an exciting future, there at Dupec. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, good luck to him as he takes over that great program. All right, let's get into 8-man football. A couple changes in our area. Orangeville has a new head coach, Todd Kramer. He's a name we're familiar with. Kramer was the former head coach at Ackland High School. He led the Bulldogs to a 48-16 record from 2009 to 2014. During Kramer's time at Ackland, he led them to the playoffs every season, including a trip to the 1A semifinals in the 2011 season. So I think it's a great hire for Orangeville. They struggled a little bit, but you get a really established head coach here who's had a lot of success, in that conference, in that area. I think it's a good hire.
Yeah, in that area and in sorry.
You're good.
I keep getting distracted because I was wondering if it was raining.
Oh.
Was he a head coach at Ackland when they were 8-man or 11-man?
No, from 2009 to 2014. So yeah, they were 11-man then.
Okay, gotcha. Did you say his record?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, like you just mentioned, 48 wins. That's a great resume to be coming into Orangeville. Certainly going to be a different brand of football going from 11-man to 8-man. But again, having a Coach Kramer out there available back on the sidelines and familiar with the area, that should bring some instant success, I think, back to Orangeville.
Yep. All right, one more coaching change in the 8-man ranks. River Ridge has a new head coach, Jared Burlage. He takes over for Doug Nicholas, who has resigned after 10 seasons leading the Wildcats. Nicholas had 35 wins in his career, guided the Wildcats to 2 playoff appearances, including a semifinal appearance, and they were undefeated in that shortened COVID season. So new face out there, but congratulations to Doug Nicholas on a good run there at River Ridge. And Mitch, one more coaching change. I'll let you take this one. It's a coach you're very familiar with on the move.
Yeah, getting back into the coaching ranks. So 2-time state champion head coach at Morrison, Corey Bielema, getting back into the sidelines. He's be taking over at Limestone, which to my knowledge has not historically been a great program. I don't know what the connection is there. That's south of Chicago, right? On the east side of the state?
I think they're near Peoria. I think it's a Peoria area school. Yeah.
Okay. Either way, I don't know what the connection is there. Seems like a random place to land, but maybe there is a connection there. I'm not sure. But regardless, a tremendous coach, as mentioned, he brought both of the state championships to Morrison while he was there. And if Limestone has been struggling, they're getting a great coach to hopefully change things up. So, yeah, good to see his name randomly popped up in the news that day that got announced.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised when I saw it come through, on X or wherever I saw the news. But
he had stepped down because I think I don't know if it's a Morrison thing or a state thing that they don't like if you're a head coach and a principal.
Yeah.
And so he moved into more of an administrative role at Morrison. I don't think he's still there. But either way, that was why he had stepped down to pursue more of an administrative role. But again, good to have him back in the coaching mix, and maybe we'll be talking about him down the road.
Yeah, going back to, like you said, when he was on the sidelines with Morrison winning state championships, he was the coach that I was talking to, a lot of different Saturday afternoons after they'd win some big football games. Really nice guy, always took the time, really, well-spoken, always gave great answers, was really accommodating to the media. Actually, Mitch, I made a Morrison Mustangs highlight DVD back in the day, back in 2009 or 2011. So
explain to the kids what a DVD is.
Exactly. As Dan Pearson used to say, they ended up being drink coasters years down the road when kids forgot they even had them. So,
I would love to bring in today's youth into an old KWQC editing booth.
Oh my gosh.
They wouldn't know what to do.
I wish that there was a museum or one of those edit booths just sat in its state and never changed. Unfortunately, the building has been renovated since then. So
yeah,
those edit bays don't exist anymore, but boy, those were, they wouldn't even know what to do. Yeah.
It was a relic.
I'm proud to say that I edited on tape back when I first started in my TV career. So I had the old, I got my first job by sending out a resume tape. not a DVD, not a, YouTube video. I sent out tapes, VHS tapes.
And I said before, I would have to physically run, sprint. Thank God I ran track at Ambrose while I was there.
I was going to say
sprint down the hallway to take a tape that had 10 seconds of highlights on it to the control room, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So it could be played on air within the next 30 seconds.
Probably shout out to Tyler Wilhite, was probably in the back in his younger part of his career, waiting to hand that tape and put it into the machine in the back. So now director at KWQC doing big time things there, but I'm sure he was waiting for those tapes, probably cussing under his breath, like, where are these tapes at? We needed them 10 minutes ago, but well, thank you for doing your running, Mitch, down the hallway. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it.
When you were described that video, you forgot the word amazing when talking about my video.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
All right. One more topic to discuss. As we said, Dupek, big things coming. They have a new head coach, but in 2026, so obviously not this upcoming football season, the next football season, Dupek is on the move. Mitch, tell the people the landing spot. Most of them already know it maybe, but give the people the details.
Yeah, so Durand and Pecatonica High Schools have agreed to join the Big Northern Conference in their co-op sports of football, as well as boys and girls soccer, beginning, as you said, in 26-27 school year. This is a big move. Dupek moving into, at least from a football perspective, into a conference where they'll be playing bigger schools. Dupek has always been one of the bigger schools in the NUIC. It'll certainly bring a little bit of balance there from a football perspective, give them some good competition as they would most likely continue to be in 3A football and prep for that, that playoff kind of gauntlet that has been 3A. That could change now that new rules are in place, but 3A always seems to be a pretty tough beat.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about, the move to the Big Northern Conference makes sense to me for Dupek for the reasons you referenced. But when you talk about playoff time, Dupek in recent years has beat Stillman Valley in the playoffs. They beat Oregon. They beat Genoa Kingston. They played Byron the year that Byron won a state title. So they've been in the mix with these schools. So I think that this is the logical move. I mean, they're the 3A school in pretty much a 1A conference. And I think as they were rebuilding, it's been a good fit. Obviously, they've been competitive in this conference, but I think when they get into playoff time, it'll serve them better to be playing a Big Northern schedule. So I think this is an exciting move.
And this certainly then frees up a spot in the NUIC, which will be cause for a lot of speculation on who they would want to fill that void. Yep. We've already heard some names thrown around. Not going to speculate on that whatsoever. As we live in this day and age, there's always going to be moving parts and moving teams. And so this is probably certainly the next recent example of that. So Dupek moves out and we'll see who's going to slide in. And remind me, who is Dupek replacing in the Big Northern?
Dupek is replacing
Rockford Christian.
I believe one of the Rockford private schools that's moving.
I think it was Rockford Christian. I think,
and I think they're moving to 8-man. So
I think so.
Yep. Mitch, you talked about not wanting to speculate, but let's be honest. In text threads, we've drawn up about 5 different variations of these conferences, just in fun, trying to figure out what would be the best fit. And that I love it. It's fun to speculate. Off the record, it's fun to speculate. I am curious to see where things shake out, because I think there's some exciting, interesting possibilities there. Without getting into too much detail, you already saw Morrison go from the Three Rivers into the Northwest Upstate Illini. Seems like it's a good fit across the board in all sports. I don't know if it would be another Three Rivers team, but there's certainly obviously options up near the Rockford area as well that could potentially be a fit. So we'll see. Right. And it's, the shakeup will continue, right? It just seems like these things, kind of trickle down and one thing leads to another. So we'll see how it shakes
Well,
out.
it's just I think things are just shifting as schools, or as conferences become on average bigger. In DuPEC's circumstances, they're moving from a traditional, like you said, the traditional 1A into a maybe more fitting 3A conference. Morrison left the Three Rivers because Three Rivers was becoming more of a 2A and 3A conference, and Morrison has dropped down into 1. So yeah, some of this is natural, some of it's good, but it still feels weird that we're always talking about, teams being in new places, but that's part of the excitement too, I suppose.
Hey, and Morrison leaves the conference, and that's how you end up with an 8-foot banner.
Yes, that is true.
Thanks, Coach Adolphson. He's got it proudly hanging in his living room.
No, I know. Remember, I don't have it anymore.
I know you. I was kidding. I really wanted to be in your living room.
If Coach could have seen my wife's face the day that showed up,
I think that was the point. So yes, it could not have worked out any better in that case. Right. So, all right. Well, Mitch, you got a few news and notes for us here before we wrap up the show. Actually, you know what? Before we get into that, we should kind of give a little teaser here. If DuPEC is going to the Big Northern,
yeah,
does that mean that View from the West is heading north?
We're talking about, old faces and new places. It's being considered. We have had discussions that we could expand to the Big Northern Conference. I don't know that we're official there yet, Greg, but since we're talking about it now, it seems like it could be.
I mean, I think there are some people, especially in Byron, when they've had success getting into the playoffs, and we're talking about playoff matchups. I think they're aware of us. I'm sure several of those other schools, I would think, we've probably crossed their path on X at least. So yeah, I think it's worth exploring. I'm open to that option of maybe adding a little coverage to our show here.
Yeah, we've certainly talked to some folks in Byron over the years, and they've said that they would welcome it. And certainly we want to continue to cover DuPEC as much as possible, as we've said, friends of the program, been longtime supporters of the show, and vice versa. So yeah, we're thinking about it. Listeners of this show know that we normally talk pretty long. And so to add a completely another conference to the mix would probably force us to mix some things up a little bit and shorten some things so we can add some others. But yeah, we got to figure out the logistics of it, but it is being considered.
Or maybe it just means weekly 5-hour podcast. We're not done recording until 2 a.m.
Oh boy.
All right. Well, as I alluded to earlier, Mitch, you have some news and notes here before we wrap up the show. Let's get into those.
Just some things that I was keeping an eye on here in the off season. Certainly a lot of the athletes that we cover play multiple sports, and teams that we cover are successful in other sports as well. So, basketball, boy, we saw some great stuff. We saw Pecatonica girls winning a state championship. We saw Pecatonica boys being number one for a while. We had Eastland right there with them. Certainly some controversy there in that game that they played towards the end of the year. I know Ty and WRMJ folks were big supporters of the Sherrard basketball season. I think they had over 30 wins. In Princeton, Noah Laporte became the all-time boys leading scorer, and then he broke the all-time school record for points being scored. So certainly a tremendous football talent headed to Northwestern, but also
there you go. You got it in there. Glad you got it in there.
He's a wild cat, but he's a dog on the basketball court for sure.
There you go.
On the mat, I saw we had a lot of familiar names that qualified for state. And look, I could be missing some things here, so don't think I'm intentionally missing anything. I did see Casey Etheridge from Princeton place third in his weight class.
Yep.
Again, there could have been others. I missed it. I just saw Casey's.
I gotta give a shout out. Jude Finch from Rock Island or from Rock Ridge also finished, I believe, third in his weight class as well. He was a very accomplished wrestler, so I know he had a great season. So I wanted to make sure to give him a shout out.
And certainly we've got baseball coming up. I know we've got a lot of talent that we cover in the football season that translates over to baseball. So we're certainly going to be seeing a lot of baseball news, I'm sure, coming up.
And good luck to Coach Kampmeyer, Kyle Kampmeyer.
Dakota. Dakota Baseball getting ready to go. I know he was busy in Canva trying to get some graphics going. So
there you go.
We had a brain sesh about that.
Oh, did you help him out? Did you give him your?
No, I want to make it clear. He has a very good handle on it. I gave some minor suggestions on some design stuff because usually that's my field come football season. But no, he got in there and he got it going. But let's be real, it was probably Carrie. But yeah, Dakota Baseball, go support, go watch a game. Should be a lot of fun. But again, we'll see a lot of names that we're familiar with from the football season on the mound, on the diamond, regardless. So baseball season, track season should be a lot of fun. What else? Been a lot of college commitments. Not going to get into all those. Congratulations to any seniors who have been committed, got scholarship offers, committed one way or another. Congratulations to all them. And just kind of circling back a little bit to football, we've seen some schedules start to trickle out here, Greg. Big one that I've noticed, Moline playing Davenport West. So we finally get an Illinois-Iowa crossover. We should have it every year.
I know. That's great. There were, I want to say way back before COVID hit, there was a plan for Sterling and North Scott to meet up. And then COVID hit and they couldn't do it. So it's like, little like games like that, like those little details, man, I wish we could iron it out and get those cross river games. So good to see that one.
Yeah. And I don't fully remember what Iowa's, scheduling thing is because they're in districts and that's a mess. But with the Western Big Six having two, out of conference games a year, wouldn't that be great? They do the Illinois-Iowa shootout in basketball. Wouldn't it be great to just get these teams together at Brady Street for a day? I mean,
well, that was what Edgy Tim, put us on. He wanted us to, find a way to organize like a jamboree type day where they play games all day. Man, it would be fun. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So shout out to Coach Morrissey and the Maroon program and Davenport West, who I think has been playing better over the years. I don't really know, but again, I love that because I'd love to end that debate once and for all. Only other schedule I saw was Princeton. I saw Princeton. I think they open with Newman. They play Rock Ridge in week 2, so they're really going to get off to their season playing 2 tough opponents as they normally do. So, if anyone's listening, any coaches, any players, if you've got schedules out, please share them. Would love to see them, especially these out of conference games in the Western Big Six. So it's March, but talking about schedules, Greg, we're going to be in fall football mode and summer workouts here quicker than we know.
Yeah. One more note. I've been seeing that the Quincy High School football documentary, Blue White, they're doing a screening of it this week. And I believe it's going to be released sometime soon. So that is very exciting.
Is that a YouTube thing or is that a?
Yes, I believe it will be. Okay. Yes, I believe it will be on YouTube. I saw they're doing a screening, a documentary screening and a locker room tour March 20th. So $20 per person to go get in and be a part of that. Man, if I was a little closer to.
We didn't get VIP tickets to that.
Man, if I was a little closer, I'd drive down and pay the $20.
Hey, look, again, is it covering just last year or the past 2 years?
I think it's just last year from what I gather, but I'm not positive on that. So
regardless, we talked so much about Quincy last year, the past 2 years, certainly one of the best programs that we've covered in the history of the show. Some of the best talent that we've had the privilege of covering. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, just to relive some of those games and those memories of one of the best teams that we'll probably ever cover, really. Back-to-back 7A quarterfinalists, back-to-back Western Big Six champs. So having a documentary, that's a cool thing to do. I know not every school can do that. Quincy has the resources and I guess the creativity minds there that can do that. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yep. All right. Well, Mitch, this was fun. This is a good way to kind of get back into things. And certainly the IHSA news was timed out perfectly. We were going to jump in and record anyway, and they gave us plenty to talk about. So that's exciting.
They must have known.
That's right.
I mean, they had to have known that we were going to record, and they said, we got to get this meeting in.
Yep. So thank you to everyone who listens, who follows along on X. We won't go totally silent. We'll try to keep some content rolling throughout the off season. but certainly once we get into, May and June, we'll really start ramping up our previews, breaking down teams, what they look like coming into the new season, and maybe talking to some head coaches about what to expect. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of exciting stuff. You haven't, a reminder, go back, check out our awards episode, hear about all of the individual player awards, the team awards, the coaches, game of the year, all the awards we handed out from this past football season. And then coming out next week, depending on when you listen to this, maybe it's already out, a sit down with Hall of Fame Illinois football coach Tom Yupst. Really good interview with him, longtime coach, and really great story in his whole career, but then the way he recently rebuilt that Marquette program. So go check that out as well.
Hey, and as always, support your local journalism. Subscribe to Friday Night Drive. Check out Off the Air with Matt Randazzo. Great stuff going on there. Check out NUIC All Access. All the things that can keep you covered while we might be silent.
Yep.
Give you something else to listen to than us two knuckleheads.
WRMJ Sports Line every Saturday
WRMJ
morning.
Sports Line, yeah. Yep. Support the local journalists out there that are doing the work day in and day out. And again, they'll help fill the void better than we can.
Man, see, this is what I get when I don't put notes when I don't write out everything in the notes of the podcast, because I had planned on bringing up Matt Randazzo's show right off the top when we were talking about all of our stuff, and I didn't. And then, you being the best friend with Matt Randazzo that you are, you went ahead and brought it up. So
right, I haven't been invited on the show, but other than that, we're good. You've made an appearance. You brought a Polar Pop.
I did. I went out one time, went out to the studio, was in studio for an interview, which is a really cool setup. Like it's really unique. It's really great. I encourage anyone who hasn't checked it out. It's Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. He brings in a variety of, sports journalists, a variety of sports personalities, athletes, coaches from all different levels, from high school to college. They even brought in the Steam Wheelers general manager. I think they're going to have segments with the Steam Wheelers moving forward during their season. Right. So just a really great way to stay connected to Quad Cities High School.
If nothing else, check out the episode with Brian Stocking. That's all you need.
Oh, that is so good. I just listened to it today. Such a good episode. Brian Stocking is a gem. So no, I encourage you, get out and listen to Matt Off the Air with Matt Randazzo. Subscribe to him on YouTube. That's his big push. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well, I guess. But all right. Well, thanks, Mitch, for jumping in. We'll stay in touch. We'll keep the listeners attuned to what's coming next. And we'll be talking about football.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody.
That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.